Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to talk about your child's PSAT report and give you action steps that you can take. Just a couple of housekeeping pieces. Hopefully you have your child's PSAT report in front of you. We will be referencing that. If you don't, we are recording this. You can watch it. You can reference it later when you have your score report in front of you. And we'll tell you today also how to get that if you haven't yet come across that. Additionally, we like to answer as many questions of our clients as possible. So there is a question feature that if you look at the top of your screen, there's a question mark. Feel free to submit your questions via that feature, and we will try to get them answered. If we don't get your question, that could be for two reasons. One, you asked a question that we know we're going to answer coming up later in the webinar. Number two, we're running out of time. We also want to respect everybody's time. So if we don't get to your question, we will email you a response afterwards if we weren't able to cover it during our broadcast. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to look at how we can really use these results, because it would be a shame for our kids who, quite frankly, even though I own a test prep company, I do believe that kids are over tested. And so it'd be a shame to put our kids through one more test and not gain anything from that. So my goal is that everybody leaves here with action steps that they can take to make the most of these results and what they've learned from them. So what is the PSAT? So the PSAT is a pre-SAT. It's testing virtually the same skills as the SAT. It is, though, aimed at students who have completed 10th grade or in fall of 11th grade. With that said, we have many 10th graders and a few 9th graders even taking it. So don't be alarmed that it's an 11th grade normed test, but it is an 11th grade normed test. This test also doubles as the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, we'll talk a little bit more later in our webinar to go over how that works. We also have a lot of blogs on that as well, but that's for our top students. It only qualifies in the 11th grade as a qualifying test for national merit. I had a 10th grade parent email me this week with their child's scores when they, after they had gotten their hands on them, and the student tested very strong, but the mom noticed that on the score report it said your child does not qualify for national merit. And she said, how could they know that already? And I said, well, because he's a 10th grader. So it is only in the 11th grade year that will qualify for national merit. So even if a sophomore hits that score, actually there was a few years ago, we had a student who had such a great national merit score. The mom had contacted us, and it would have qualified this 10th grader as a national merit semifinalist. So the mom was tossing around with the son whether they did prep over the summer to try to hit the national merit qualifying score in junior year, and they felt so confident because he was literally like, I think 222 or 223 out of 228. They decided not to test. Unfortunately, in his junior year, he went down and did not end up being a qualifier his junior year. So it is possible to get a qualifying score in the sophomore year and not hit the mark in the junior year. That's why we feel that if you fall into that very, very tiny group of people who should consider prepping for qualification, and we turn a lot of people away for that because many don't have that potential. But it is possible to not hit it your 11th grade year after hitting it sophomore year. So keep that in mind. That same kid did go on to prep for his ACT and hit a perfect 36 ACT. So that was great, fantastic for him. So moving right along though. So, what we've seen lately is a trend where 3 years ago, had you asked me, how many 11th graders are taking the PSAT, it was virtually all of them. What we've seen is a move away from that, and we see school districts offering it for those students who are in 11th grade and have the potential only for national merit, and then doing something else with their 11th graders that day for the students who are not the very tiny percentage that would be national merit qualifiers possibly. I see a lot of schools now giving it to 10th graders so they can determine who has that national merit potential that following year. So that's sort of who's taking it. Just because you took it in 10th grade, I know there's a bunch of 10th grade parents on today. That does not mean that your child will take it in 11th grade. So why would you take it? Well, it is terrific practice. We at LEAP believe, we started doing test prep in 1999. So we believe in the 20 years that we've been doing this, that practice for one test benefits both. So even if your test of strength is the ACT, that doesn't mean that the PSAT wouldn't be beneficial. We also, and I'm going to show you towards the end of our webinar today, we also use this to help us determine if students are a better ACT or SAT test taker. There also can be indications, although it is not the end-all be-all, of what classes students should take in school, and again, national merit qualification. So we're going to recommend, our recommendation when I get asked who should take it, we believe either all 10th graders or at very least our honor students and our high achieving students. 11th grade, frankly, there is not a benefit to 11th graders taking it unless they're a top student, because no colleges will ever see these PSAT scores. If you become a national merit semifinalist or finalist, they will know that you scored high enough in your state to qualify, but they don't know what your scores are. So colleges never see the PSAT scores. That's a common question that I receive. So as I already said, it is a pre-SAT. It's slightly shorter, and it's slightly easier. The SAT is 3 hours. This is 2 hours and 45 minutes. One of the things that we see with kiddos who are prepping for both ACT and SAT is it's rare outside of semester exams that students ever sit for a test for hours on end. Even semester exams are on average 2 hours regardless of where you go to school. So with that said, it's good practice to sit for a test and work on endurance. We know that some students will look at their scores and we can just see they start out strong and then they kind of drop off because they can't sit for the test that long. A 1520 is the perfect score. So even though this is a pre-SAT, 1600 is perfect on the SAT, 1520 is perfect on the PSAT. But here's the deal. These scores are concorded. So what I mean by that is if your student took in the junior year a PSAT and scored 1120, they're saying that you would expect that if you went ahead then and took the SAT at the appropriate time, which the SAT is normed towards students who are in the second half of their junior year, if you would take the PSAT, you would expect to score an 1120. So the PSAT and the SAT, you can just equate those scores very easily. And there's no essay on the PSAT, and even on the ACT or on the SAT and ACT, the essay is now optional. We're down to only 19 colleges in the United States that require the essay portion of the ACT and the SAT as a part of the application. It's my belief, and I've said this for several years now, that we're going to soon see that part of the test retired. And the reason that happens is colleges go ahead and they collect a lot of data and then they track students. And when they find out that a piece of data that they're using for college admissions is not predictive of who will be successful at their school, they drop it. So this is a sign that most colleges, there's 4,000 colleges in the United States, so we're down to 19 of them that say there's value still in that test, and I think we're going to see that go away. So here's the score report deal. Your reports were online on December the 12th for Ohio. If you are joining us from another part of the country, which I know there are many that are, I sort of use Ohio as our reference because that's where most of our clients live, and that's where I happen to live. So the scores were released anywhere between December 10th and December the 12th. Ohio's were available December the 12th. They are available online at psat.org. If you don't already have an SAT, College Board, PSAT account, you have to create one. We have a blog post on the LEAP College Bound blog that explains how to do this. And it also explains that if you would create your account and log in, and then your scores aren't there, which actually happens sometimes, then what steps you can take to get those scores moved over there. So if you haven't yet seen your scores, I recommend that you get in there and do it. Now there's two types of reports, and we're going to kind of reference both in today's webinar. One type of report is the one that you see online. So the online report, when you log in, has greater depth of information and data for you to look at. And I'm going to point out what is extra when you log in. There is a paper report. So some school districts have moved away from ordering the paper report and paying for it. So you may or may not get a paper report from your school. It is not something that is mailed to you by College Board. It is a report that your school would give you. If you don't have that, you are able to download and print out the paper report I'm going to refer to when you log into your online collegeboard.org account. So the screenshot that I have on right now is a screenshot of when you log in and you're looking at your scores online. So that's what that part is. This is part of the paper report that you can download and print out. So over on the top left-hand side, it shows you your percentile, your overall score, and your math, and we basically just call it English, but it's a reading and writing score. And when we say writing, that is not writing an essay, which I'll explain in a minute. So this is what it looks like when you log into your account. This is what it looks like if you print out that score report that you want to have handy. So how do they get to that score? If you saw both of these, it says 320 to 1520. This individual score was a 940, which was the 46th percentile, right about average. So they take the reading and writing score, which will be somewhere between 160 and 760. Then the math score, they add these two together, also 160 to 760. And then whatever those are, that equals your total score of your 1520. So that's how they get to that 1520 scaled score. And, it can be really confusing with ACT and pre-ACT because, ACT is on a 36-point scale. But we're going to show you later in the webinar how you can see, for instance, this student back here who had a 940, what does that equal in an ACT or a pre-ACT? So we're going to show you how to do that. So remember, because these scores are concorded, this is saying that this student who scored a 960 would also score predicted to score a 960 on the SAT. There is, and we all know this, if that same kid takes the same test on a different day, there's what we call standard deviation of error. And so on the PSAT, the standard deviation of error on the total score is 40 points. So really, this student would be predicted to score anywhere from, all the way up to 1,000 points, and then, subtracting down to 920. So 920 to 1,000 would be their predicted range. So it's actually a range that they're predicting, not an exact score. So how do you start to look at this? So this PSAT score report, this is where, so we're taking, this was at the top, right? Right below it, it breaks out your English, which is your reading and writing score, and your math. So this first number at the top, when you're breaking out on just the English stuff, this is your scale score. So they take your raw score and they scale it to somewhere between 160 and 760 on this PSAT for the English. Then the second area right here indicates your percentile score. So this student who got a 430 on the English part of the PSAT was in the 31st percentile. They scored better than 31% of the students, but they scored under 69% of the students. The other thing that it shows us is college readiness benchmarks. So they use these colors. Red means if this student would have fallen, if this student even probably went down another 10 to 15, 10 to 20 points, because it doesn't go in fives, it goes by tens. If this student would go down at all, down to a 420, they would be in the red, which means they really need to work on strengthening those skills. And I'm going to show you how to read the information that you have available to learn what skills are lacking. This student happens to be in the yellow. So that means that you're almost to the benchmark, but you're not quite there. So what does benchmark mean? Benchmark is they've looked at the data and it's saying kids who score exceeding the benchmark, so in this case, in the green, they have a high predictability of getting a B or C in a college course that is in English in this case. So that's what it means. Now, are there kids who go to college that miss their college readiness benchmarks on the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT? There certainly are. So I would caution you in putting too much stock in that. Sometimes there's just kids that aren't great test takers. Sometimes they've got a lot of opportunity to improve. Even after kids are all done testing, there will still be kids who will find a fantastic college fit who didn't meet all of their college readiness benchmarks. So, don't despair if your child is in the yellow or in the red. Then we do the same thing with the math score. So we've got our scale score of 530. The student's far better at math than they are at English. And we've got the percentile score at a 69. Now the student has moved into the green, so they are exceeding the college readiness benchmark for mathematics. Okay, so what skills are assessed? So here's the deal. There is a reading test, there is a writing and language test, and there are actually 2 math tests. So look at this. See how it says math with calculator questions, math without calculator questions. Kids freak out sometimes because they have to actually put their calculator away for part of the math test on the PSAT, and that is the same thing for the SAT. But I will tell you that there are questions on the ACT. Even though the ACT allows you to have your calculator out at all times, there are questions that are specifically designed so that they can be answered better, faster, without a calculator. So kids really need to know when to get out the calculator and when to put it away. The great thing about the PSAT and the SAT is they already tell you when you've got questions that are designed to be answered without a calculator and those that are designed to be answered with a calculator. So I actually see that as a benefit. And even though, kids are very calculator dependent, my own included, so I actually see that as a benefit. So when it sounds like there's, a reading and writing score, so evidence-based reading and writing score, and then we have a math score, it sounds like, it's not even, right? Because there's 2 parts are making up the reading and writing, but there are 2 math tests. So keep that in mind. These scores are actually the scores that are used in figuring out what your selection index is for national merit qualification. So you basically, a selection index, which if you're logged in, page 2 of your College Board PSAT report shows you what the selection index is. And we'll talk more about what those selection index scores are that you're aiming for. But the way they calculate the selection index is they add the reading, the writing and language, and the math, and then they multiply it by 2. So even though there are 2 English portion tests, subtests, and 2 math subtests, language arts, English language arts skills are weighed more heavily for national merit consideration than math is. So fair or not, and I'm with you, those of you who think that's not fair, they are weighed more heavily. So, but it is what it is. We can't do anything about that. So more on that later. So here we have basically how this test is broken up. And if you're logged in, so this is a screenshot from a student's account, a student that I know that we've worked with at LEAP. So if you click on show details, it'll also pop down. It was just too much to get on the screen, and we'll show you the percentiles that you scored in each of these 3. Then it will also explain the color key here, okay? then you can click on reading questions and writing and language questions. I'm going to show you more on that in just a sec. So here's what happens. There's a deeper breakdown of these skills available online. So for instance, these are the skills that are tested. So if you look at the previous slide, you would just think we just have reading, writing, and language and math. When you go one level deeper to say, okay, what kind of math, what kind of reading, what kind of writing and language? Command of evidence, that's based on reading. Words and context, that's vocabulary. Expression of ideas, that's has to do with reading. Standards of English conventions, that's grammar. This student needs to do the most. What this shows us right here is this student needs to do the most work in what? Standard English conventions, which would be grammar questions. And you're saying, well, how in the world would we ever figure out what that is? And I'm going to show you. So reading, what's being tested? So here's what's being tested, but I'm going to show you how you can assess it in a second for your own child. So reading has a variety of passages. They will include graphics. So it might be a table, a chart, or a graph. For those of you who know anything about ACT or pre-ACT, or you have attended our ACT planning workshop, which the next one is the first week of January, if any of those things that you've done, we have that ongoing, you know that there's a science section on the ACT. So with that science section on the ACT, that's where they have tables, charts, and graphs. On the pre-ACT, they have the same thing. On the PSAT and the SAT, those graphs, those schematics are embedded within the reading questions. So, and even sometimes in the math questions as well. So they're going to have to use a lot of evidence, a lot of inferencing to answer the questions. The SAT prior to 2016, if you remember it all, was very heavy on vocabulary, and they dumbed down, it's still hard. They dumbed down the vocabulary when they redesigned the test in 2016. But one difference I would say with the PSAT over the ACT here is it does require more inferencing. It also tests writing and language. So grammar is heavily, heavily tested here. And the way they test writing is not by having the students actually write, but they give them passages and they have to, it might be a question like, what would be a good transition sentence? Or what would be the best, if we were going to add a sentence to this paragraph, what would be the best topic sentence? So that's how they test in a multiple choice format. That is how they test the knowledge of writing without a kid having to write. In the math, we already talked about calculator. Non-calculator, the other thing that tends to freak kids out. So if your kid, gets test anxiety and it kind of gets in their head, another thing that can make students uncomfortable on the PSAT and may have come into play, and I'm going to show you how to find out, is while most of the test is multiple choice, there are grid-in questions, meaning you just solve the equation, there's no multiple choice, and then you just basically write out the answer. The math on the PSAT is only going to go through Algebra 1 and geometry. So, and there's a lot of real world problem solving, which is another way of saying word problems that students tend to not like unless they really like math. Okay, so as I said earlier, it really, at the top of the webinar, it really would be a shame if you got all this great information and you didn't do anything with it. So they show you within your account, and this is not on the paper, well, it does show you this on the paper report, but it takes it deeper on the online. So I recommend that you reference the online piece for this. So they identify the questions that you get correct. So if something's correct, now you get a check mark. If it's omitted, meaning your student, so if you see this symbol, it means that your student did not list an answer for that question. They just skipped over it. They left it blank. That's a problem, and I'm going to tell you why. If they answer the question but they got it incorrect, you will see a letter which tells you what the correct answer was, but that's your indicator that that was answered incorrectly. Why is omitting an answer a problem? It's a problem because when you are scoring this, you only earn points for correctly answered questions. You are never deducted for incorrect questions. So look at this student. So here would be an example. Question 24 here. The correct answer is C. The student left it blank. Okay? All of these check marks are questions that they answered correctly, but this one question right there, which was a multiple choice question, so that student should have just taken a stab at it. One of the strategies we teach in our prep is if they're calling time 1 minute remaining and you look down and there's just no chance in the world that you're going to get it, pick a column and just stick with that letter. So that kind of gives you a visual, or you can look at a score report and know exactly where you ran out of time, because pacing can be fixed. Most typically, it can be fixed with instruction. So, and so you got check marks. Here's another one. This was a math grid in. The correct answer was 1368. Question number 30. They didn't even attempt it, and it was a difficult question. So this tells you how difficult the question was, what you gave as an answer, what the correct answer is, and the level of difficulty. So that's really great information. Now you take it to the next level. So then you go and you look for every actual question and every actual answer. So when you're on, and this is another screenshot from a student account, so when you're on the online version, you go to this area. So this would be a writing test. And if you click on the number of the question, what will pop up is the question. Okay, this was reading test, obviously. So it gives you the passage. It gives you the question. It gives you click here and then it tells you what the explanation is for why that answer is the right answer and why the other ones are wrong. So this is just fantastic. So you can go through all the way through and you're clicking these numbers to actually see what the question was, what the correct answer is, and an explanation of why that is the correct answer. So great information. Next thing. So now, besides giving you that step-by-step sort of, you got this question wrong, and this question was an expression of ideas and testing words in context both. This one was just testing grammar. That's what this is telling you over here. Now, instead of telling you question by question, they summarize it for you. So the next thing you have access to is if you log in, this is not on the paper report, if you log in, up here at the top where it says Skills Insight, where I highlighted it for you, if you click that, it will take you over to for reading, writing and language, and math. It will tell you what your strengths are. So for this student, this was their reading. Their score on the reading part only was a 25 on a scale of 8 to 38. If you want to, you can click here and go to the reading questions. But for our purposes right now, this is telling you, here are your strengths. Here are your weaknesses as it relates to reading. Then when you click over to writing and language, here are your strengths. Here are your weaknesses. That helps you formulate a plan of what needs to be attacked as you do test prep for ACT and SAT. Even though this is a different test, I want everybody to keep in mind, those of you who have attended our ACT, SAT planning workshop where we have a whole section on frequently asked questions about the tests, these tests are testing the same concepts. Grammar's grammar. It might look a little different in the way it's laid out. It might be emphasized a little different in how it plays into the overall score, but comma rules are comma rules. And so that's what you're gaining from this. Algebra 1 is Algebra 1. You can't change it up at all. We might see that a kid doesn't do well on non-multiple choice questions, but that's, other than that, the concepts are the concepts. So keep that in mind. And this gives you a really good summary, even if you're only going to do the ACT, because, here in the state of Ohio, where schools get to choose whether they're going to give juniors an ACT or SAT, about 96% of Ohio school districts go with the ACT. So you might be looking at this information and going, we're going to be doing the ACT only. It still gives you valuable information as far as skill, strengths, and weaknesses. Okay, something that you can only get online is what's called AP Potential. So when you're logged into your online account, if we were able to peek up above this line on the online account, you'll see another listing of different menus that you can click on. One of them says AP Potential. So you may not know this, but the College Board, who owns the SAT and the PSAT, also owns the AP program. So as we start to go ahead and think about classes for next year, we at LEAP encourage appropriate rigor. And what does that mean? So that could mean, there was a student I was working with just last week who, that student, they're doing all college prep classes, and they're taking honors in social studies and in Spanish. That's it. And that's appropriate for that student. However, sometimes I meet students who they're taking maybe all college prep or some college prep and honors, but they're nervous about AP and they're getting straight A's. That would be an indicator that they're probably ready for a little more rigor. I know that Ohio State is a favorite school among Ohioans and actually outside of Ohio as well. And recently I was at an event where the Ohio State rep was there. And I had a family that I was working with, and they were doing test prep with us, and I knew that the family was aiming for Ohio State. And the student, even though we were getting, somewhat, we were only about 2 points away from what they probably needed ACT wise. I knew that the student hadn't taken any AP coursework or rigorous courses, which really at Ohio State is needed. So I said to the rep, here's the student profile. What do you think? I gave the GPA, 3.9 GPA. First question out of their mouth was, how many AP classes? And I said none. And they said low potential of admission, which I knew, but I wanted to get it straight from the horse's mouth. So I encourage students to take appropriately rigorous courses, not too rigorous for them, but it's not the end of the world to get a B in an AP class rather than straight A's in college prep classes. It is looking at you're challenging yourself, and colleges like to see that, and they don't want students taking the easy way out. So how do you get to this? So when you log in, you go up to the top, you click on AP Potential. These 3 dots that you see, if you see 3 dots, it means that the student, so this student has high potential of doing well on the AP exam, so a 3, a 4, or a 5 on the AP exam in art history. But for this kiddo, their high school doesn't offer that course, so that's not an option. So the number of circles you have in, the greater the potential is. If there's a check mark, it means that your school's offering that. However, I was in a student's PSAT account today. The parent wanted me to look at something, and I went in there to look at it. Their school had not loaded in their AP courses. So while we did have an AP potential report, there were no check marks, which meant their high school has not taken the time to load those in. So it's just then referencing this AP potential report with your school's course selection guide for the year that you're scheduling. So that's how you would want to look at that. I would also say that if you're doing really, really well in a class and you have a lot of passion about it and it's connected to your future career goals, even I would not say that AP potential is the end all be all. I think that who you are daily in class is more important. And so if you're considering an AP course and this report didn't necessarily recommend that you would do well, I would talk to your teachers, because these teachers, I would talk to your current teacher in that subject area, and then I would seek out the AP teacher in your building and get their take on this, because again, not everybody's fantastic test takers, and I certainly, if a kid wants to challenge themselves, I really am not a fan of kids taking like 5, 6 AP classes a year. There's very few kids that can survive that and be healthy mentally, emotionally, socially. But if you're thinking about AP potential and it wasn't there, talk to the teachers in your building. This should not be the end all be all. But if you've been nervous about taking AP and you're considering upping the rigor, maybe this could encourage you in some ways to seek that rigor out. Here are the factors for college admission, and we do go over this at times when we offer our What Colleges Want webinar, so look for that in the future. Okay, let's talk about this national merit piece now. So high scores, national merit. The benefits can be from no benefits at all. So if you apply and get into a highly selective school or even an Ivy League, you expect no benefits for being a national merit finalist other than you've got a feather in your cap. However, there are many colleges that give full tuition, and some even give, full tuition plus a laptop, plus a study abroad, plus room and board. I have a list of the schools that have good national merit packages. If you are interested in receiving that, shoot me an email and we'll get that sent over to you. But here's how it works. So we already talked about it's only your 11th grade selection index score on the PSAT that qualifies. Qualifying in the 10th grade, having that score in the 10th grade would not help. The past 3 years for Ohio, the qualification selection index has been 217, 219, 219. So for the class of 2019, this year's seniors, for the class of 2018, it was 219. That's the highest we've ever seen in Ohio. This is out of 228 scaled points. It's different. This is a different number than your total PSAT score, than your English or your reading or your writing or your math. Remember, it's the reading plus the writing plus the math times 2 to get to this score based on 219. We work nationally with others who love to crunch data, and what the data is telling them now is for sophomores, if you are at a 195 or higher selection index this year, you've got the potential to get there with some prep. We encourage kids at 195 and higher to prep. Earlier I gave the example of the kid who started out at 222 and dropped to 216 and missed it by a point. So even if you've tested high, that is not a reason to not prep before you do this, because there can be a lot riding on this. The predicted range for the qualifiers for the class of 2020 is a 217 to 221 with a 219 likely. We knew that 219 was the predicted score for this year's senior class of 2019, and that was correct. So that did end up being correct when we had looked at all the data earlier. This announcement, here's the painful part for those of you that are looking at this piece of it. So what happens is you take the test in October of your junior year, you get your scores in December of your junior year, and they do not announce semifinalists until the September of the senior year. And then during college applications, you have yet another application to do, which is for becoming a national merit finalist. So we've written several articles on this on our blog. I don't want to take a lot more time because this is really only for those highest scorers. And so I would encourage you to go over there, hop over there and read about that. If you want the list of benefits through that program, then give us a shout. If you're on and you are a sophomore family and your sophomore scored 195 or higher on their selection index, I urge you to reach out to us so that we can just make a recommendation on what you should do based on your scores, and then it's up to you if this is something you'd want to do. Prep is the summer between the sophomore and junior year. Okay, now I just talked about the high flyers, and I just told you, I mean, really, we're talking about the top 1% to 2%. So that's not the majority, obviously. If you're looking at your score report today and you're disappointed, I want to say a couple things to you. First of all, it is early enough, whether you're a sophomore or a junior, that there is plenty of time to improve with a good test prep plan. Nothing can replace doing well in school, taking your academics seriously, and so that's why, hone your study habits. Read and write a lot. Get tutoring. Ask your teacher for help, but attack the academics. When we do test prep, we can help resolve a pacing issue. We can teach some, skills, but we are not a replacement for not paying attention and doing well in school. There's only so much on, the academic side that can be improved upon. If we see that you're really weak on these skills, we'll certainly work on it, but typically we don't have people spending 20, 30, 40 hours prepping with us. And so we can't reteach a year or two of school through the tutoring or even the classes. So do well in school. Take classes that are going to challenge you and really work on your critical thinking. But the fact of the matter is, you may just be a far better ACT test taker. I think of my own oldest child, who is an adult now. When he ended up being a very, very top ACT test taker. So he was in the 97th percentile. He, on his PSAT, and because he's an adult now, I know he won't care that I'm sharing this, but on his PSAT, he just did not do well on the PSAT. He was a 45th percentile. So how are you 45th percent on one and 97th on the other is baffling, but that's the case. What we know nationally is 25% of students are going to be better suited for the ACT, 25% of students will be better suited for the SAT, and for the other 50% of you, it's not going to matter. You can go ahead and do either test. And so what in that case we say is, okay, well, what's your high school giving? If your high school's an ACT school, which the majority are, then focus on the ACT. So 75% of you really should just probably focus on the ACT. But if these scores that you got indicated that you should focus on the SAT because of your PSAT results, then, the 25% of you that should, that's what you should do. All colleges take both the ACT and the SAT on equal footing. So it doesn't matter which score you apply to a college with. That was not the case when every parent who's on this webinar today was applying to college, but it is for our kiddos. So keep that in mind. Test to your strength. Okay, so how do you compare these? Here's the scale. So just remember 1520 is the top of the scale on the PSAT. 1600 is the top of the scale on the SAT, but they are totally concorded. There is that optional essay on the SAT, but it is going away. Oh, also for state testing on the ACT and the SAT, keep in mind that they do not offer that optional essay. So if you are applying to schools that are among the 19 that still count that, you will not be able to do that on your state test. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. We invested last year at LEAP in having somebody, those computer science gurus who I just don't understand it, and I'm so thankful that they exist, but we had them create a score converter on our website. So everybody on here can hop on over to the LEAP website, and they're able to figure out what your PSAT equals in an ACT and vice versa. So when you go to the site, this little green dot right here, this little green dot is a slider. Now this is a screenshot, so I'm not going to be able to slide it. But what happens is, as you move up this ACT number, when it jumps up to 23, then it will give you, there are actually several numbers that will, on a SAT, PSAT scale, that will equate to a 22 ACT or a 23. So because it's a smaller scale, you're going to need to play with sliding around. So the bottom line is you figure out your test of strength by pulling out if your school gave pre-ACT or you've taken a free diagnostic ACT with LEAP or any other organization. We can help you no matter who you've taken that with, but we give them regularly. We've got a bunch of them coming up. Or you have both an SAT or a PSAT score or only a PSAT score. All of these are concorded and we did the work for you. So just hop over to our site and figure out what your score equals. So that can help you make decisions on ACT or SAT. Let's say that you find out your PSAT is stronger, but your school's giving the ACT. I would prep for that ACT for the state test. And then right around that same time, I would also take the SAT, see how those two come out, and then repeat the stronger one. You know, if it's telling you now that it's the SAT, it probably will still be the SAT, but that's how you can play with these numbers. So if you want us to go in and figure that out for you or figure out how do you prep for both at the same time, all you have to do is email us and we will give you a free testing plan, whether you end up using us for test prep or not, or whether you've done a diagnostic with somebody else or not. Bring us those results, bring us your pre-ACT, your PSAT, and we will give you guidance on which test to take, when, and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and are you better suited for strategy prep or a hybrid of strategy and content concepts prep? So we give a guarantee that all of our students will increase their scores. We're not only doing test prep, we help with college major and career coaching, college selection applications, and just anything on the college bound journey. So you guys have been fantastic, high attendance rate. Everybody stuck with us to the very end, even the latecomers. I know life gets busy, so we've got this recorded. Everybody will receive a link to the recording in our follow-up email that goes out about an hour from now, and you may rewatch, but most importantly, just reach out to us with your questions. Let us know what questions you do have and get some good, solid guidance based on data and proven results so that your kids can hit these tests out of the ballpark. Thank you so much.